Hey, good morning, everybody. Everybody feeling all right? I mean, as all right as one gets on a Monday. Good morning, or good afternoon, or hopefully not middle of the night for y'all. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you recall, or if you've joined us before, this is part of the Class Central Free Web Development Bootcamp, and we're all working from, oh, how lovely. I hope everybody did have a lovely weekend. Hopefully as relaxing as possible. And we're going to be working from the Free Code Camp curriculum, looking at their responsive web design. And if you recall from last week, we left off talking about margins and borders and all sorts of, well, just mildly frustrating foolishness, wasn't it? We talked about margin where it adds push. So if you add a margin, it sort of pushes your HTML element away or closer. And that felt weird, didn't it? And I said, well, I promise that this will feel less weird the more you do it. And there's nothing I like more than taking my own advice. So let's keep doing a little bit more of this and see if it feels less weird. This is the last, make this a little bit bigger, hey? Oh, heck, that's a bit of a jump. We feel all right with that? Went on a little bigger? Yeah, all right. So this is the last one we finished last week, where we adjusted the margin of an element. And remember that in elements, I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to read from this. It's very Monday morning for me. An element's margin controls the amount of space between the element's borders, the outside of the element, and the surrounding elements. I like to think of margin as sort of social distancing for HTML elements. Like, hey, here's how much space I need you to give me between my border and the next thing over. Yeah. So we've got two different boxes here. We've got a red one. Yeah. We've got a blue one. We see that the amount of margin assigned to each is a little bit different. So the red one feels like the red one has more space here than the blue box does. We talked a little bit about keeping your class names human readable. And look at this. Oh, are we supposed to be starting from the 23rd exercise? You know what? I'd have a hard time telling you which one the 23rd was. Oh, heck. So I think this is the last one we finished, isn't it? So we're going to go on and we're going to review this one quickly, and then let's go ahead and do this really fast, and then we'll check and see which one we're at and see if this feels all right. Thank you so much, Egg Roll. So we're just going to change the margin of the blue box to match that of the red box. We see a yellow box. We see a red box. And the margin for the red box is 20 pixels. Yeah, this has changed the margin of the... I think I'm just going to change this. Oh, heck, I think I'm just going to get all over the place. I think I'm just going to change this 10 to say 20 as well, yeah? How's this going to feel? I think last week when we did this, the blue box jumped. Yeah, and just matched what the red box looks like. Let's go ahead and I really appreciate you pointing this out for me. Use attribute selectors to style elements. Is that where we think we were? I'm reasonably sure. Attribute selectors to style elements. We think we've done all of the padding? We think we've done all of that last week. Am I woefully incorrect? Give me just a second. You're wonderful, Egg Roll. Override class declarations by styling attributes. Use attribute selectors. Here we go. So we want to go ahead and so we haven't done these yet. Oh, okay. We study 50% between the streams. Do you all want me to review the ones you wouldn't have done on your own? Yeah, last time we started where we left off. If it's okay, we'll go through these clockwise ones really fast, just because I want to talk through them, just because they're super weird. So we'll talk through them. Don't, I'm so sorry. We're going to review super fast, okay? Extremely quickly, aggressively quickly. And to make it up for y'all, I'll go ahead and stick around a little bit longer and make sure we get through the other stuff we're happy with. Yeah. So I'm concerned that I'm wasting all y'all's time. Let's just go ahead and rush through these with terrifying speed. So it's also possible to have a negative margin, if you recall correctly. We're to change the margin of the blue box. And here we're just going to come down to the blue box and change it to minus 15. Minus 15 is like, oh gosh, please cover this parent element. Yeah. Super fast, nice and fast, aggressively fast. This is the one I kind of wanted to look at because this is weird. We're going to look at how to add these additional attributes to how we do padding. And we're going to make the different sides of the element different. Yeah, we can do this. We're dealing with this padding top, padding right, padding left, bottom, and padding left. And those order matter. Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to come to the blue box and we've got the format done here. And I think we're going to copy this really similarly. So here's padding top is going to be 40 pixels. Why is that padding top looking blue? That's not quite right. Padding top. Have I done something that doesn't work? I'm in doubt. I like to continue to do it and see if I'm doing it wrong. Padding right is the next one in this order. Oh, heck. Oh, do you know what I've done wrong? I bet you do. I'm always reliably rubbish at this. If I don't add this semicolon at the line before it, it doesn't know that I'm done. Yeah. Thank you so much for catching that for me. Here, the padding right is going to be 20 pixels. I think by default it makes it pixels, but which one's next? Is it padding bottom is next? And I bet you can guess why this goes in this order if you think about it. The padding bottom is going to be 20 pixels as well. And the padding left is the last one. It's going to be 40 pixels. I think everything's going to be fine, don't you? Oh, heck. Oh, heck. 40 left should be, blue box class should give, oh. After I spent all that time telling y'all you could never have a space in your CSS arguments. Cool. You can absolutely donate to Free Code Camp if you like. Monica, you're beautiful. You're perfect. The clockwise order absolutely matters. That's why it's in this weird order, isn't it? Sorry, I'm mirrored for you all, so I'm trying to do clockwise, or I'm like, oh gosh, what is it in the mirror? But we're going to come in and we're going to set different margins for each side of the element. And this is going to feel like what we've just done. Have we just done this? Oh, margin instead of padding. And this is going to feel super familiar, isn't it? We've got the margin top. Ooh, we've got the formatting. Margin top is going to be 40. Margin right is going to be oh, heck, 20. And this is great because it's clockwise. It should be so simple to remember. And I absolutely refuse to remember it correctly. I don't know I probably guess I know what's wrong with my brain, but it will not stick. So this is one of the very exciting things where if you have to consistently stop to remember it, it's still fine. Got 20 pixels on the bottom. as you see, every time I finish typing one of these, left, as soon as I tell this, I say, hey, I want this to be 40 pixels. That should jump. That should add that margin right there for us. We're going to run these tests. We're almost at 50%. We're running, we're hurrying. Now, this was the question we got from Monica just a moment ago to say, hey, does the clockwise order of these matter? And it does, because typing, padding top, padding right, that's a lot. That's typing padding quite a bit, isn't it? And you can just use the clockwise notation and say, hey, computer, you know what order I'm going to ask for these for. I'm just going to ask for these. So we're going to come to the blue box and we're going to say, hey. Because we're very informal with our browsers. We're going to say, I want some padding in here. And I want the top of that padding to be 40 pixels. And then we have a space between them. And I say, well, hang on, help. Padding top, padding right is going to be 20, isn't it? See, I'm absolutely rubbish with this. It's totally fine when you get these instructions to say, wait, what? Then it's top, right, bottom is next. So that should be 20 again, shouldn't it? We'll do another space and a 40. There's a 50-50 chance I've gotten this right. We are having a very lucky day. Let's do one more of these. We're going to do the exact same thing with margin, which is going to feel really familiar. You say, well, we've just learned that we can take our padding and set all of them in a clockwise way, or if you're looking at me in the mirror, all of them a clockwise way. Let's go ahead and do the same thing here. We say, okay, when we start at the top where it's 40 pixels and add a space, and we say, what we do is on the right side, and here it says 20 pixels on the right side. And here it says 20 pixels on the bottom as well. Oh, heck, where am I? I'm nowhere and everywhere. 20 pixels on the bottom as well. And that means it probably wants us to have, a margin of 40 on the top and its left side. So let's get 40 pixels in here. Is it not supposed to look like the red one? Oh! There we go. We're caught up. Everything's chill. Thank you very much for waiting with me. So we're going to use attribute selectors to style elements. And this is going to feel a little weird, right? I mean, has all of this felt a little weird? So far, we've been adding an ID or we've been adding class attributes to elements when we want to specify a style. And these are called ID or class selectors. Yeah. We're going to use an attribute equals value attribute selector to style the checkboxes in the cat photo app. This selector matches and styles the elements with a specific attribute value. For example, and I love it when you say for example, because that means we're just going to copy and paste this, isn't it? Ooh. For example, the below code changes the margins of all elements with the attribute type and a corresponding value of radio. So this means this should change anything where the type, and let's find that type. I'm going to come all the way to the bottom. It's going to be dizzying. It's going to be terrible. Because we've got some things that have the attribute, and here's the attribute here. The attribute is type, is set to radio. So if we added all of these, I think my question is, where do we put this? We've never seen this before. It looks a little bit like inline, except for these square braces. But then we've got our classic. Ooh. So any idea what the reasoning is behind the need for the existence of these attribute selectors? So this is such a good question. Aren't class IDs enough? So class IDs are unique. And think about this as think of it like a selector, like an element selector, but a little bit more specific. And I said, If I was using an element selector for these, it would be input. Input would be the element I want to style. But input actually has a bunch of different looking types of ways an input element can be represented. So really I say, I want to change the radio buttons, which is a bit more specific than saying I want to change all of these elements. But yeah, so it's a little bit more specific, but still generic enough for you to paint all of these. Lyd is asking, hey, when we give all 4 values, is there any exceptions where we can omit the pixels? Don't have it, or for example, following you. As a best practices, do you hate that, don't you? Best practices. Best practices are going to have you write pixel each time, just because there are other types of measurements. My understanding is it defaults and assumes you mean pixel if you leave it off. But please, please, please write them. I know. So I think we're going to copy and paste this. I think we're going to copy and paste this up here where our CSS lives. And I think we're going to do that because I'm seeing these curly braces. Oh, did that, let's delete it and see if it hops. Okay. So we just copying and pasting the example. We're seeing that work automatically, magically, through the magic of CSS. And we are using the type attribute selector to give checkboxes in the cat photo app, a top margin of 10 pixels and a bottom margin of 15 pixels. What do we love to do as web developers? Because you are all web developers. We love to copy. So we're going to set this type selector. The type is the attribute we're using, and we're setting it to checkbox. Yeah. And what we're saying is, hey, whenever you see something where the type is a checkbox, please set the margins to, okay, so the top is 10 pixels, and that's the first one we do. And then we don't set. We can't just skip to the bottom, can we? So we've got to say, well, give me 0 here. And then I want the bottom to be 15 pixels. And then 0 pixels again. Oh, heck, it didn't ask us to do this, though, so let's just delete this. Oh, can we mix and match different measurement units when setting the margin property? Ooh, do you know what? I've never tried this. What do we like to do when we don't know if it'll work? We get weird, right? Huh. Yes. Hey, in case you were wondering, you are absolutely welcome to mix and match. I've never tried that before. Thank you so much, Nigel. And Gigi's asking, hey, can we set multiple attributes in one type? So do you mean like in this type box that we would set the margin and then also set the padding and also set the background color? Because if that's what you're asking, yeah, absolutely. Let's. Oh, you don't have to believe me. I don't believe me. Why is that not working? I lie? Background color. Oh gosh, it's because I can't set the background color of a checkbox. It's the checkbox. I think we can. We could set the padding, for example, but background color is a difficult one. Oh, can we set checkbox radio? Oh, I see. So I think we'd have to set those differently. Those are 2 different selectors, but we can check. Does it work if we do this? That was weird. You know what? I'm going to have to do a little bit of research because maybe it looks like that might actually work. It had never occurred to me to try that. I love this incredibly weird, incredibly cool question. It's either breaking that when we do it. Um, is the type attribute only applicable to an input element? Well, let's go ahead and run the tests and get our check here. And then let's go ahead and check. So I'm going to go ahead and oh, heck, I'm rubbish. Let me go ahead and I'm going to MDN. I'm getting a bunch of different things. Do you know what? I don't want to get too far off. I'm reasonably sure that we can use the type attribute outside of inputs, but I'm not quite seeing it. Can I be terribly rude to my beautiful assistant and say, could you go ahead and have a look on MDN and see if you can find the cheat sheet for the type element? This is why they don't give me assistants in the real world. Like, I'm just mean all the time. So we had a question just a minute ago from, oh gosh, Platypus has got it. If we wanted to do that, Platypus, look, I'm still going to make you take my job. If we wanted to set type with more than one, Platypus says, well, the way I might try and do this is say type equals checkbox, then that comma, and then the type equals radio. I mean, that syntax feels a lot more normal. This is what y'all get when you get me before coffee. Absolutely pathetic on my part. But Nigel sort of previewed something for us, and I want to come back to this. And Nigel said, "Oh, hey, can I set the margin to 20 pixels and 10 M?" And we're going to be talking about M for a second. Yeah, we feel cool about this. So, last couple of times we've been setting this to pixels, and pixels are a length unit which are absolute. It's like an inch or a centimeter or a millimeter, but way smaller. But M or rem are relative to the value of another length. So an M is the size of an element's font. So if you've got a really, really big font, an M is going to be relatively big. You can change the font size property if you want to change it. That's pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and play with M's for a minute and see what things look like when we're making changes relative to the font size we're using. We're going to come all the way down. We're going to come down real slow. And we're going to set the padding on the element with the red box. And we're going to set it to 1.5 times the size of the font. You say, Jess, this is so weird. And I'm like, right? It's so weird. Everything is so weird. You see padding? We don't have to do all this 20, 40. We just get to set it one time because we want it all to be equal on all the sides. 1.5 M. Oh, and that feels pretty chunky, doesn't it? That feels substantial. Here we've got like 20 or 40 bit pixels of these little bitty things, but saying, hey, I want this to be 1.5 size the text. That hits pretty hard. That feels really, really substantial. I like it. Yeah. Let's go on. So we're going to style the HTML body element. And we talked about this, I believe, last session where we said, hey, everything, all the elements you're going to have in your HTML are really going to be child elements of these bigger conceptual elements. And that the top level element, the most parental element, is going to be the doc type, the HTML tags that we haven't learned about yet. But we are going to learn about body. And body is really saying, hey, body is where we put, main, for example, lives in body. Body is where we put the stuff that lives in our website. We can do this. And once we create our body, we're going to go ahead and start talking about CSS inheritance. And I'm so excited to talk about CSS inheritance because it is the biggest mess. It's just such a mess. It's such a mess. It's not a, CSS has done a really good job with inheritance. My fragile, useless human brain, like humans, we've had a tough couple of years. Like everybody's a little stressed out. But my poor beleaguered brain is absolutely rubbish at holding on to inheritance. So we can both be confused together. Oh, here's one. TPX is asking, hey, is that 1.5 of an H5 element? I think it would be out of what the P would look like in that font is my understanding. Yeah. I'm wrong all the time, so it might be wrong. Oh, is an H5 the same unstyled, the same size as a paragraph? Quite possibly. Hang on. We're going to, our body element should have the background color of black. So I think this is telling us that it already has a body element. I want to put one just out of weirdness, just to show what these look like. And literally everything you want to show off on your website would be in here. Your main element, which we've talked about being really important for assistive technology and bots, understanding this. So all of this, there we go. Thank you so much. So that looks like SGV instead of HTML. I'll go ahead and have another look and see if I can find that in a second. I'm so sorry to send you all over the internet for some foolishness. I saw the SGV one when I searched myself, so I think that's not me being helpful. But what we're going to do in here is we're going to say, hey, we're using a selector. Yeah, one of those element selectors. And we're going to set it on this big element, which is the body. Set to black. Way. And everything on this page just turned black because the body is one of these big elements encasing other things. We're gonna dig into this a little bit more. It's gonna feel a little bit more okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it'll feel just as confusing, but in a reasonable way. So every HTML has a body element, and usually you're going to be writing it yourself. That's cool. Oh gosh, I was just talking about my fallible human brain, and it's left me for a moment. So we're going to create an H1 element, and this H1 element exists within our body element. Like they've abstracted out the body element for us to better understand this, but I think that abstraction makes it a little harder for me. If you all don't mind, if it's not me being a bother, I'm going to add some of the structure here that's been abstracted away for us. So I know. Hey. All right, hang on. So here's my CSS up here. That would be my CSS file, sort of in the real world, yeah? And then I'm going to start my body element here. And then I've got my main element that lives inside my body element. And now I've got my H1 that lives in there. And I'm going to add the text I'm being asked. Here's a really good question. What would be out of the main element but still inside the body element? That's really useful. That might be things like, oh gosh, would your footer would be if you had a footer on your website, I think that would exist outside your main element, but inside the body element. If I had a header, maybe, I think that would as well. But do you know what? Nav is really useful. I think, yeah. Matchstore's asking, isn't header above body and footer below body? You know what? Give me just a second and we'll double check on that. I think weirdly in my heart that those might be within body, but I spend a lot of my day being very consistently wrong. Do you mind if I set that very good question down for a moment and then we'll look it up? Yeah, it's going to feel fine. So we're going to create a element that says hello world. And this is going to show us some weird, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to put you off because it's such a good question. And I've genuinely blanked on it. But here we say, well, create an element that says hello world. And we're going to make everything green by adding color green to my body. My body style. Okay. What I've been saying in body is saying, hey, make the background color of this big element that encompasses everything else black. It's okay. Then it says, you know what? The body element, make the body element, make the content, make the elements that live within the body element, make them green, please. And it says, okay, well, your H1, and here, imagine main doesn't exist. I've just added it for best practice. Oh, here's a really good question. Barrow's asking, what's the difference between body and main? That's so useful. So body is going to be most of the stuff that sits on your website that's visible or audible to your attendees. Well, thank you so much. I'm thanking myself. Mervin's just thrown in some useful things about HTML layout. So body is going to be all the stuff on your web page, whereas main is just going to be that main non-repetitive content. So Platypus really helpfully pointed out that if you've got a nav element, a navigator, that's going to exist within your body element, but it's not part of your main content. Yeah. So main is a subset of body, and that's going to be the stuff you think your user actually wants to see. Yeah. Everything's fine. Everything's going to stay chill. So, oh, where is my useless brain? Ooh. So actually the color of which part is changed by using color. I love this. So this question is the whole main point of this exercise. So when we set the color to green, we set the color of elements in body that we can turn green. I mean, that's mostly text and links, isn't it? So we set the elements that can be turned green using this color command. We set all of them in the body to green. So that means any child element, any elements that exist within the body element are going to be turned green as well because their mother, the body element, has been turned green. That feels weird, right? So where is my brain? We're also going to go ahead and give my body element, so this big parent element, we're going to set the font family. Ooh, the font family is to monospace. A really, really good question. So the so Jonathan's asking, hey, does the font family here require a fallback font? And excitingly, it doesn't. So we're using one of the system fonts. We're using one of the ones we think is built into your operating system. We haven't imported one like we did with Lobster with a Google font. So we think we probably don't need a fallback for this one. It's going to be chill. And we see that when we added that, our H1 became monospace. Let's run the test and see. Okay. But that didn't really explain a lot, did it? Let's feel this out. And while we feel this out, I'm going to go ahead and come back to that question we got just a moment ago. And I thought this question was really good. Who asked this? Okay, with a W3 example, there's no body or main. How to remember hang on, one at a time. So let's go ahead and I'm going to move and we're going to check out this HTML layout elements and techniques. So, I don't want CSS float layout. HTML semantics is probably what we need. Oh, this isn't it either. Oh, how rubbish. This is me being rubbish. Let's try MDN. Yeah. So we're going to come into MDN Web Docs. We're going to come into, Let's come into HTML. La 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 la. Concept and syntax. Well, show me the syntax, please. Getting started with HTML. I think that'll probably do it. Well, I mean, this is telling us stuff we already know. Nesting elements is really useful. Block, inline. I'm going to search for MDN example page. Maybe they've given us an example. There we go. Document and website structure. That's what we want, isn't it? And there we go. This is what we want. So, show me this, please. Oh, come on then. Here we go. This is what I wanted, isn't it? This is what we thought. Let's make this nice and big while we talk about it. Oh, heck. So, drop this into the chat. I think we can make this just a little tiny bit bigger. Ooh, that's a lot. So here we've got sort of the prototypical example of what we think an HTML element's likely to look like. And here we've set the doc type. And we haven't learned about that in free code camp yet, but you're going to do this every time you build a website. We've abstracted it away for now. And there you're saying, hey, browser, I'm giving you a document and the type is HTML. Then the first tag, the top level element is HTML. And all of the rest of your website is nested within an HTML and a closing HTML. Oh, Eggroll points out that Sandbox have spoiled us a bit. And this is one of the challenges, isn't it? That a sandbox lets you get started right now. But the sort of Faustian bargain with the sandbox is it abstracts away some of the scary stuff so you could put your hands on learning right now. But then you've got to go back and reintroduce some of this theory. And it's a little weird, isn't it? And then we say, hey, I want to set the head. And in the head, we set stuff like, what kind of characters are we using? What's the title of my webpage? And then we're going to link to the style sheet. So this is where we talked about these being files. This is where your HTML file says, hey, I put my CSS file over there. Way here in the head of my website, I want you to make sure you go and get that. And similarly, that's where we're going to put our link to fonts. Yeah. We come back down here and then we see our body element. We love this and say, hey, you know what? We told you there was going to be a body element coming. And our header, and here header means the actual visual thing you can see. So if you're looking at this in, oh gosh, I'm not looking at either. If you're looking at this in YouTube, the header probably says something like search and has a YouTube logo. And if you're watching us in Twitch, it's probably got like search and like a little cartoon, something over there and like some notifications. But the header is that fixed visible bar of stuff. And then when we come down here, we've got, well, here's the navigation, which we haven't really learned about yet, and we'll do some more. We've got a form, and this is really our main, here's the main we were talking about. Yeah. And there we can start saying, hey, here's an article. I'm starting an article element and really getting into the kinds of content we think our users came to our website for. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to swap back and I'm going to come all the way back to our nice, safe sandbox. And I said nice and safe, but we're going to be doing inheritance at CSS. This is not safe. This is not relaxing. I find this wonderfully stressful. So let's be stressed out together. Let's have 3 cups of coffee and swear. So we've learned that. I think that taking that break to look at what the structure of an HTML file looks like is going to be really useful, because now we're going to be talking about how that flow works and what that means for inheritance. So we've learned that a body is one of those big parent elements that most of our content's going to live inside. Yeah. So if we add some styles to our body, those are going to trickle down. They're going to be inherited by all of the elements that exist within body. So everything in your main is going to inherit everything that your body has because the main is the child of the body. Yeah, I can dig it. Oh, but if you've got a paragraph element in main, the styling is going to be inherited from body to main, and then main is going to pass that on to the paragraph element. It's like having an heirloom bracelet or a beautiful painting that somebody in your family has passed down. It'll come to your parents, and then it'll come to you, and it'll come to your children. And that's the same way that CSS will pass things down, except CSS is not a democracy. CSS, there's no beautiful utopia where they always agree. Sometimes there will be conflicts. And there's going to be the idea of overriding this. And as a very general rule, the more specifically you set something, the more powerful it is. So if I say, hey, I'm using this selector to set everything within the body to these things, and you come back later and say, hey, I'm actually going to set this class. A class is more specific. I'm going to set this class that conflicts with what this selector says. And because the class is more specific, it's also more powerful. So it's going to override and say, oh, you can't inherit this. I have different rules. I have different plans for you, my love. So we're going to set a CSS class. Speaking of my loves, you, my love, are going to remind me, what do I type to set a CSS class? Ooh, while you're telling me what to type to create a CSS class called pink text, I'm going to answer this extremely good question from Beryl. So Beryl's like, I get it. We can only have one body. Can I have more than one main? And no, babe, please don't. I don't think it'll break. And I'd love to experiment. Yeah, you love how it's like, don't do it, but definitely experiment and see what it does. You shouldn't have more than one main. It's confusing to search engines. It's confusing to users using assistive technology. And really, it kind of defeats the purpose of main. Main here is saying, hey, this is the main idea. This is what we're talking about. This is what this website's all about. You don't need 2 stars of your show. Yeah. We're going to come in here and we remember. I say we remember. You all remember, and I always forget that you start a class. Oh, heck, you start a class with a full stop, a period right there. Oh, and I'm doing all of this wrong. Look at me. And then we've got our curly braces, the fanciest of all braces within computer science. And we're going to say, hey, I want to set the color of anything that has this class to pink. And that didn't do anything. Because when we created a class, all we did is make a club. And we haven't invited. Yeah, so when we make a class, we create a club called Pink Text, and we set the rules. All the members of our club, they have to have the color pink. And now we haven't put anyone in that club yet. We're going to go ahead and add this H1 to our club. What do you think is going to happen when I create? So class equals, oh heck, pink. And I'm going to stop right before I finish it. So what's going on here is we already have a rule set for this H1. This H1 has inherited the rule from the body saying it should be pink. Yeah, you think Hello World's going to be pink when I put text. I'm excited to. You're absolutely beautifully and unstoppably right. And that's because when things conflict, there's just sort of a rule. There's sort of the rules of power. Doesn't that sound very Machiavellian? And classes are always going to be more powerful than selectors. They'll override that inheritance. I think this is supposed to be pink. Oh, do you know? Well, this is perfect. So the hierarchy would be, so you think, we're thinking about these in different orders. So the most powerful is going to be ID. The most powerful that we've learned so far, abstraction, it's monstrous, isn't it? So the most powerful that we've learned so far is ID. And then class is more powerful. Oh, Magstore's got it. Shh, we'll cover it in a second. You're absolutely right. But I'm sorry for those of you who can't see. Magstore is saying, "Oh wait, is important the most powerful?" And I say, "Yeah, I think it's the most powerful." But important is a little cheat. Oh heck, sorry. So ID is indeed the most powerful. And class is a little bit less powerful. Then element selector, and then you know what? I think that a specific element selector like H1 and a general element selector, I think those are both equally powerful. But we'd have to, do you want to let's go ahead and get a little bit further, but I'd love to ask you to experiment. So if you set the body to a specific, and then you set a specific element selector, do those override each other? Okay, I've lied. Let's try it. Okay. Angel, I see you've got a question. I'm absolutely going to get to this in just 1 second. I just want to get weird for a minute, if that's okay. So I'm getting rid of that. Let's see what happens. I'm getting rid of my pink text apps. So we had a really, really good question saying, hey, do we think that setting a more general, a bigger selector like a body, do we think that's going to conflict with a more specific element selector like H2? And you know what? When in doubt, let's get weird. Well, let's set a selector for H1 and say, let's make the color red. Ooh. Now, the question I'm asking is, did that happen because the H1 is more powerful, or did that happen because of the order these are in? What's the best way for me to check that? Is probably to control X. I want to take that and make it first. Ooh, so even if I move these around, it does indeed, I was wrong to you. I was lying to you. It does look like the more specific element-based selector is more powerful than setting a wider selector like the body. You were absolutely right, and I was absolutely wrong, and I appreciate it. Let me put this back. And then I saw a couple more really good questions. So, yeah. Oh, you know what, Angel, this is perfect. I love how you're asking this as a question, except you're absolutely just right. So ID is much more specific. It'll override something more generic like a class, which will override more generic than a selector or something that's been inherited. You are unstoppably right. So, and whenever you forget, and it's fine to forget these, it's not going to hurt you. Just go ahead and check and say, oh, hey, which one was more? And you can look it up on MDN, or you could say, oh, I'll just write an ID, or I'll write a selector and see what happens. Whenever you're not sure, your options are to look it up or to look it up or get weird. So you can look it up or experiment. Yeah. So everything's fine. Yeah. Well, so this is really useful. So the child is a more, it's a little weaker. And it just means that if the child element is inheriting something and it doesn't have any conflicting information, it'll just take what it's inherited and use that and say, oh, thank you very much. So if the child doesn't have a class or doesn't have an ID or doesn't have specific rules and its parent is giving it some rules, it'll just say, oh, okay, well, I mean, you're my mother and I trust you. I'm going to go ahead and make this background blue because that's what you've suggested. Everything's fine. And if something's not fine, it's just a website. You can go back and fix it. You can undo it. It's 2021. The internet feels very, very important, doesn't it? But everybody makes mistakes. And like, this is a sandbox. You cannot break this so badly that things are broken forever. I mean, let's try it. I don't doubt you, but if you break this so badly it's broken forever, That's really a skill in its own right. So, we had some questions early about order, and I was messing with order. And this one's going to let us know when order matters. Are we excited? So, we're going to create a class called blue text, and we're going to make sure it's below our pink text. And we remember that we start it with a full stop just because that's how classes work. And we say, well, when you see this club, anybody who's a member of this club, their deal is they want their color to be blue. Yeah. And now, yeah, do you know what? When we had Miguel come and talk to us saying, hey, use the dev tools to debug CSS, that's absolutely a way to go. Oh, and he's so smart and interesting, isn't he? If you haven't seen it, it's up on the YouTube channel, or if you're in Twitch, it's going to be in the past feeds. So, oh gosh, remind me, if I want to add 2 classes, is it just a space? I think it might. Oh, you know what? Let's check. Ooh. So it was indeed just a space to add 2 classes. But what's going on here? Why? And I'm going to leave this as an open question. Both pink and blue are equally powerful. They're both classes. They're equally specific. Why is blue winning here? Yeah. Why do we think? And I think that when this said, hey, make sure that the blue text class is below your pink, I think that that's Felis, after my own heart. It's the order of class usage. So think of CSS like a tired teacher or a tired parent, where sometimes you'll say, oh, what are we having for lunch? I want mac and cheese. I want mac and cheese. I want mac. And they'll say, oh, well, we're having sandwiches for lunch. But you keep going. You say, oh, I want mac and cheese. I want mac and cheese. And finally they say, fine, we're having mac and cheese for lunch. The same way, the last thing that you tell CSS is going to say, that was the last thing you told me. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Yeah. Oh, Felix is asking a really good one. Now, does blue text, pink text add up pink? And I love this question. This is so exciting. Let's cut this. Let's paste that here. I think that it's not going to, because hasn't. And really what's going on here is you said, I want this element to be member of 2 clubs. But when you see these rules, the blue is the rule I've set most recently. Go ahead and go with the thing I said last. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So Matchstore is saying, oh, heck, sorry about that. So it's about class usage order when 2 classes that are equally powerful conflict. Yeah. No, I get what you're asking. To say, hey, when is order important? Like, when is the order you're declaring this in your CSS? When does that matter? And it matters when you have a conflict between 2 rules that are equally powerful. Yeah, that's a good question. It's very chill. You want to keep going? Let's keep going. Hey, note, it doesn't matter what it classes. Or do you keep going? 64%. Everything feels fine. Now, we're going to get weird. I mean, I keep saying we're going to get weird, and we just keep doing more CSS. Must be helplessly disappointing for you all. So we are going to override this again. We're going to create an H1 element by giving it an ID and styling that ID. And we're going to be pretty boring with this. So we're going to set an ID, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this orange text. Because we need to, we can set it to whatever we want, but it's going to keep things easier, I think, if we call this orange text. So we set an ID. Yeah, you're right. We ideally, we don't want to be writing classes that conflict. This is just showing you what if they did crash. Sorry, I'm just suggesting that CSS is weird. And I think the entire concept of computers is pretty weird, right? Like, We took a bunch of sand and turned it into microchips and light. And now we tell it what to do using a big brick of molded plastic. The more you think about computers, the less you. I find it all deeply troubling, isn't it? I mean, in a reassuring way. So we've created a class called Orange Text. Oh, no, gosh, I'm lying to you. I'm terrible. We've set an ID. Decidedly not a class. We've created an ID for our H1 element, and it's called Orange Text. That feels all right. And what we're going to do is, you remember how to set rules for an ID? We've got that hash. We've got that hash, and we're going to say, well, when you see orange text, I think what it wants us to do here is set the color to, and I'm going to stop hash or the hashtag or the pound sign. Platypus points out, like, you know what? We turned sand into microchips, and sand wasn't made to think. We've just been so cruel to these rocks and making it do our bidding. So we've learned that selectors can be overruled by more specific selectors, who can be overruled by classes, who can be overruled by IDs. What's going to happen when I set this color to orange? Yeah. Ooh, the ID is more powerful. So it's one. And here, it doesn't matter where I put this. We said, well, we just saw that putting blue text below pink text matters, but I can take this. It's going to disappear. It's not going to be orange. And I can put it way before the body. And it doesn't care. It says you can put that anywhere you want. I respect. CSS respects you. And I think that's so nice. I respect that an ID is going to be the most powerful thing unless I see something important or unless I see something inline. So let's learn a little bit more about this. We've got Angel saying, like, oh, that if you've got an ID, it just gets to push a class out of the way. It says, nope, be gone. I am the boss of you. Out of the room. Okay. Monica's asking if there are any ways to gamify learning CSS. We've got some folks who've put some CSS games, like actual boop, boop, boop video games on the forum. So I'll go ahead and bump that thread when I'm done here. You'll love it. It'll be great. Ooh, look at me advertising CSS games like you're going to love it. So we've proven you absolutely believe us now. Well, I mean, you believe me. You trust me. You loan me money. That an ID overrules a class, overrules a selector, overrules a more generic selector. But inline. Remember the very first thing we did. So we're going to see what inline does. We should have an inline style. We're going to make our H1 element white using an inline style. And if you wrote actual code that looked like this, I would come and I would whoop you. Look at all this. Where you say, oh, I've created a class just to overrule the class. And I say, it's good for learning, but it's very stressful, isn't it? When we say, we're going to set the style. We're going to set the inline style. I'm going to set that to white. And because I've given you a spoiler, what's going to happen? What? That's not what I expected. Style. You know, it would have been so more impressive if I had done it right, wouldn't it? The style is that the color is going to be white. Look at me taking all the beauty and drama out of the world. So, yeah. As best practices, do you want to use inline styles or avoid it? It really depends what the project you're working on is doing. If it's your project, inline styles if you feel like it. If it's somebody else's project, they're probably going to give you some style rules and say, oh yeah, do it. Or like, please stop doing it. Yeah. And Monica's saying, hey, are there any conventions about the order to put style elements in your CSS like HTML? So I like to put the more generic ones up top and the more specific ones below, but that tends to be so. Yeah, you don't have to. There are very few cases where, lying to you. Um, it's less usual for the order. Here we've got pink and blue, and because those conflicted, the order really mattered. But generally, if you're writing really well-informed CSS, I don't think that's usually going to be the case. So I like to group stuff together. Say, oh, this is for this part of the website, so I've written them in order. Or, oh, here's all my classes, or here's all my selectors. But really experiment, see what feels human readable. Ooh, I'm going to start taking allergy meds, I swear to y'all. I'm going to run the tests because we've seen that an inline style overrules even an ID. I'm ready to keep going. Yes. Who was, look at me looking around the classroom, like which one of you, but which one of you was so good earlier? I'm scrolling up to find you. One of you was saying, hey, important. I want you to get credit for being like, oh, Match Store, of course it's you. Important. I knew we would get to important eventually. I like important because it's like yelling. And like, who doesn't like yelling, right? We've just proved inline styles will overrule it. And so sometimes, and this is saying, hey, importance because sometimes you use CSS libraries and they'll create a bunch of rules and you're like, oh, I don't like these rules. I just want to tell this what I like. We're going to go ahead and add the keyword to important to pink text to make sure it will always be pink. You say pink text. Ready? I like this because look at that. That's like rah, rah. I'm just yelling. I'm yelling. This is important. What happens when I push T? Yeah. Once I yell at my CSS and say, hey, this is what we got going on here, it knows that it's important. Oh, do any CSS libraries use important? This is such a good question. Generally, they're not going to set important for you. A good library shouldn't. And I'm so sorry there isn't a very important. I think you'd probably just go through and say, oh, somebody in this library has said that this is important. That feels a bit rubbish. I'm going to find and delete that is probably the way I'd do it. So it's not quite October yet, so it's a bit early. I want to talk to you about witchcraft or hex codes. Yeah. Felis is saying, if Felis is pointing this out, you're probably right and I'm wrong. Some of them do, but most will only do it when it's important. So hex codes are like secret witchy codes for setting way more specific types of colors. Because we said, oh, black or green. But what if I want like sort of purpley, bluey green? So we're going to learn about hex codes. How dare those libraries tell you what is important? I know. Doing all the work for me and then telling me what I should care about? Absolutely not. What if they're Ooh, so we've just learned about this. So I'm not going to answer. I'm the meanest teacher. So if we've got two things that are equally that have the same rank, we've got two things that are on the same level and they conflict, which one is it going to pick? I think it's going to pick the one that was declared last. Yeah, if it's the same rank, the order matters and they pick who came last. But if you've got code and you've got multiple different things declared important that are conflicting, I'm going to give you a 10-minute break and then send you back to pull out some of those things that say important. So hexadecimal code. I'm really excited about this. These are going to look so weird, right? So they're going to be decimals, which are the numbers 0 to 9. Cool. So just 1-digit numbers. And then it's going to be the letters A, B, C, D, E, and F. And those are going to be the values 11 to 15. And you say, Jess, What? Be cool, be cool. So this is like if we're counting, but we can only have one character, one numeral, one character that we're counting with. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. And you say, "Oh, cool, Jess, that doesn't make any sense at all, and it's weird." And I say, "Yeah, yeah. It feels less weird the more you do it, but really, conceptually, every time you look at that, you're like, why is that? No, all right, weird." So, oh, and I love this because we're going to talk about like turning it up to 11. So the lowest color you can get is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It's all zeros, and that's going to be black. Yeah, let's try it. More number. Yep. Oh, do you know what? Platypus has got a good point here. More number, more color. The more numbers you add, the more we turn those up. Yeah. Let's see how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The hex for 6. And look how exciting that is. Oh, do you know what? You know who's rubbish? It's me. How exciting. Nothing has changed. And it says, good job. You've changed nothing. We're going to use a hex code to mix colors. Just like when you want a lot of color, get those F's out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're going to get weird. And we're going to just copy these at first, just to get a feeling for them. Yeah. So digit 0 is the lowest number in the hex code. And that is like having no color at all. And you say, well, no, what? And I say, yeah. So digit 0 is like turning the color all the way down. And digit F is like, give me the most color you have. And we're just going to preview this right now. But these 6 digits, each pair, so the first two, wait, we're going backwards. The first two, the middle two, and the last two correspond to a type of color that you're turning up or down. You say, Jess, oh, Felix has got this for us. Hex is this is so much easier than I was trying to explain it. Hex is made up of 3 pairs of numbers. So each of those zeros we had, so the first 2 zeros correspond to red. The second 2 zeros correspond to green. And the last 2 zeros corresponded to yeah. And I was like, oh, this is so good. This 0 to 255, we're going to talk about in just a second, I promise. But don't give us that yet. It's going to make it even more confusing. Don't be so right all the time. It's dreadful. It's just the worst. It's not. I absolutely love it. So let's come here. We say red. We just learned that, oh gosh, I'm just picking on you, lovely. Oh, sorry. I just like to be mean to people who are smart and lovely. So we learned that the first 2 digits in this RGB, the first 2 digits correspond to red, and F is maximum color. So we're going to say, hey, these 2 digits that are red, turn them up all the way. And then I don't care about green. I don't care about blue. And the browser gets that and says, I got you. You want, yeah, let's go ahead and add this right here. So think of hex as oh heck. Y'all are just as patient as you are lovely. Okay. Oh. So we're going to think of hex as the 6 characters. The first 2 are red, the second 2 are green, and the last 2 are blue. Yeah. So the RGB system gives more detail than hex code. Oh gosh, the hash. So we'll learn about the 0 to 255 in just a second. It gives us a little bit more fluency, flexibility, but we've got a lot of power here in hex codes. Really, the people who go RGB and the people who go hex codes, in my experience, they just tend to be a personal preference. I like hex codes because it feels like being a witch. And some folks like them because there are, yeah, wiggly numbers to play with. Felix is pointing out that you've got the exact same control. You've got the same number of colors you can touch. They just feel a little different. Yeah. So keeping in mind that we're looking at it in this format, actually, you know what? Oh, and I'm bad at HTML. That's too big and I'm bad at HTML. Everything's terrible. Maybe H3. Yeah, those fit on the right line. So we're going to take our green class and make it green. So we're going to come all the way up. We've got green text. And we know the first two colors in our hex code are red. And we don't need any red. I'm so sorry. We know the second two colors are green. Oh gosh, you're absolutely right. Thank you so much. All of y'all are yelling at me to keep my and do my hashes, and I'm rubbish. While you're yelling at me, what should I turn the green to if I want it to be green? So I don't want any red. How much green do I want? I want to turn this up all the way. What is the maximum green? I think the maximum green is going to be double Fs, yeah? And then, I don't really need any blue. I'm going to say, do not give me any blue. Good way. Well, that's a very green. And it looks like Dodger blue is not just maximum blue. Dodger blue looks like it's a Dodger blue looks like it's a creative one. So we're gonna just, hey, here's a little bit. It's like a, oh God, you know what? It's a hash again, isn't it? 1 and then E. Give me some red, not like a huge amount of red. Just give me a little bit of red, yeah? Okay. How much green do you want? He said, well, give me 90 green. And I say, what? You want, you can have 90 green. Weird. Okay. He said, yeah. Then give me maximum blue. And I say, okay, look, I believe you. Oh, okay. So a little bit of red and some green is sort of baby blue, Dodger blue. Having never seen anything with the having never consciously maintained anything with the Dodgers in my, I'll believe it. And if we want to make something orange, we turn it up to maximum red. We get a little bit of, actually quite a moderate amount of green, and that's weird to me. Someone's asking what the word Dodger means. I think it's a American baseball team. I haven't lived in the States in a long time. And then, you know what? Don't give me any blue at all, please. That's orange. I'm so dreadfully sorry. We're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of our notes to ourselves. Let's see how that feels. Oh, heck. Oh. Y'all were yelling at me this whole time saying, hey, yeah, add your hash. And I'm rubbish. What the hex code for the color orange? Y'all are going to be more responsible than I am. I just consistently forget these. Oh gosh, I will take care of my health, but I promise I'm just allergic to everything in my flat. Although it's a scary time to have a cough, isn't it? Oh, so Sabrina's got a good question. So the letters are intensities and numbers reduce. Weirdly, no. So the numbers 0 to 9 are none to quite a bit. And then the letters are even more than the numbers. So the letters are carrying on where the numbers give up. Yeah. Angel's asking, is it bad practice to use hex codes with lowercase letters? Ooh, ooh. I think it might be good practice to have capital. You remember we talked about how some stuff with computers is just tradition? I think it's just tradition. I think we just make them capital letters because we make them capital letters. And somebody who's much better at CSS is going to come and be like, no, there's a very good reason. I say, well, I mean, I'm sure, but yeah, I think we just make them capital letters because, and that's not a very satisfying answer. We've got somebody saying they finished CSS. If you finish CSS, go ahead and move on to the visual design. Yeah. Angel, if you're worried the stream's documenting all of your spelling mistakes, welcome to my current waking dream. I get to say goofy stuff all the time. And look at, we're just like, of course I know where to put, no, I don't know where to put hex codes. So we can use an abbreviated hex code. So a hex code gives you the possibility of 16 million colors. And that's like, it's a lot, right? But we can do a shortened code. Yeah. And the shortened code just means that it's red, green, blue for each character. Hang on, let's go ahead and do this. So long X characters, and that's gonna be, let's add some breaks here. Those are gonna be red, red, green, green, and blue, blue. Yeah. So we're showing this in a different format than we did last time. Here we're saying, okay, short hex. What do we think short hex is going to be? If the long hex is 6 characters and short hex is 3 characters, what do we think the format is going to be here? I think that we're going to be going with red, green, blue. So we'll have a lot beautiful. You all are absolute. Look at y'all. Absolutely. You don't need me around a bit. Oh, if I do succumb to my cough, y'all will be just fine on your. I'm gonna be fine. Everything's fine. But y'all would be just fine on your own. So this gives us a lot less flexibility, a lot less power. I'm fine. I'm not going anywhere. I'm fine. I know I'm scaring y'all because I joked about having a cough and I'm an old woman. So we've got a little bit less flexibility, but we've got less to type. Yeah. So here we're gonna only make this 3. What do you think we're going to do if I want to make this red? I think I want maximum red. You don't have to give me any of the other stuff. Nice. Fuchsia. Okay. Fuchsia is the same as magenta, I think. And here it's telling, and it's giving us the hex codes, which is so helpful. It says, turn me up to maximum red. Please don't give me any green, but also go ahead and give me a lot of, woo. Okay, so maximum red and maximum blue. In my heart, I want to say purple because I'm a primary school student. But in computer terms, maximum red and maximum blue is this like magenta that really sings in your heart, doesn't it? Cyan, which is the bane of anybody with a color printer. It's going to be, don't give me any, I don't want a bit of red, but then give me some green. Actually, give me maximum green and maximum blue. Everything's fine. And you know before I tell you that to get green, we don't want any red. We want all of the green you can give me, and then we don't want any blue. Yeah. So this is weird, and it doesn't make any sense, but it sort of makes sense in a way that doesn't make any sense, right? We are so close, and we're not going to finish all of this. Y'all are going to have to do some of this on your own. So we were asking, hey, what's the difference? And this is just a different way to do it. You say, well, Jess, when would I use RGB instead of hex? So, well, if you like RGB better than hex, use it. Or if you're using a project that uses RGB instead of hex, yeah, you can use it. It's really just another language to say the same thing. The RGB value, the way you set that is you say, instead of having a hash, you say RGB. And this is good for you to say, hey, here's what we're going to be doing. Here's what's going on. And then you go ahead and set the numbers. And these are going to be exactly in the order your hex code is in and exactly in the order we already feel good about. You say, put that red up there. Yeah. Put this green up there. So here, turning it down all the way, I want the least color possible is all zeros. And turning it up all the way, turning everything up all the way would get you white is 255. Weird, right? Weird, right? Why 250? I love this. I love this. I love this. So I'm going to go on and explain this. 255 is one of those magical numbers in computing that just come up a lot. I'm going to let somebody else yell about the magic of 255. And there's no pressure. If nobody else wants to, if you're all shy, I mean, when have y'all ever been shy? We'll go ahead and cover it in just a second. 255. Oh, 256 is the magical number. Yeah. So why are 255 and 256 magical numbers? Why do we see these numbers in computer science? Ooh, Match Store is saying, oh, way to go. Yeah, because we've got 0 to F in hex is 16 to 16, which is 250. What? Yes. Beautiful. Felis has got it. Felis has absolutely got it. That's the size of a byte. And there's a really good podcast called what is that really good podcast that you know what? I'm going to remember it in just a second. But there was a fantastic podcast that taught computer science principles. I'll remember it in a moment. That's rubbish. I'll throw it in the forum if I don't remember it. So it is the size of a byte, which is a measurement of memory in computers, minus the last number. Everything's chill. So, yep. If you do the math, 2 digits for one color equals 16 times 16, which gives us 256 total values. So because we start counting from 0, which is our hidden number, it's the same number as a hex code. We're going to set it to black. So say the hex code, the pound sign, the hex code. The hex tells us we're doing a hex, but RGB tells us we're doing RGB. And we're going to set it to black, which is nothing. So that's, don't you dare give me any red. Get out of here with your green. And I do not want a lick of blue. Do we put a comma after the last? We don't put a comma after that. But we do absolutely put our semicolon here, don't we? We're going to run our tests. And we feel good about things. Oh, that's such a good point, Felis. We think of 0. Ooh, do we think of 0 as no number? Oh no, that's going to come to me in the middle of the night. Me drifting off to sleep. I'd be like, oh, do I think of 0 as no number? And the computer thinks 0 is a number. Angel's asks, oh, hey, Angel, you're asking if I live in the UK. I do indeed live here. Yeah. It's nice, a little cloudy. Folks, y'all can ask whatever you want whenever you want. If it's a bit bold, I may indeed decide not to answer. No, Felis, that was such a good point. Like, do I conceptually think of 0 as the absence of a number? That's far more philosophical than I expected today, and I think it's really exciting. So, just like hex codes, we can mix RGBs together using a combination of different values. And I don't think there's a ton of value in like talking this out at great length. So I'm going to be late. You all know I'm lazy. I'm just going to copy these out and I'm just going to talk them through as I put them down. Red, green, blue. I want this to be blue. So don't give me any red. Don't give me any green. And give me the maximum blue. Yeah. When I find the red, same deal. We're saying, hey, we're using RGB. That's what's going on. And I want you to go ahead and give me the maximum red. Please, I don't want any green. And no blue as well. And you notice as soon as we finish that last character, it says, hey, I know what you mean. I know what you want from me. So orchid, I'm sort of, yeah, I'm sort of meditating on orchid because I'm not sure. Look at me. Ooh, typos being held forever. Oh, that's so stressful, isn't it? Give me quite a bit of red. Give me sort of a medium-ish amount of this space for readability, yeah? And then go ahead and give me actually a reasonably chunky amount of blue. Oh, I really like that. It would be hard to get a background that would make it readable, wouldn't it? And then sienna. I think sienna is a sort of brownie deal. It's asking for, give me 160 red, give me 82, so specific. Please give me 82 greens and about 45 blue. Got it. We are 82% of the way through. Oh, orchid would be a beautiful color, like something with like orchid and maybe some navy and black. And I'm terrible designer. I've just given you like 9 colors for that. Yeah, 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 yeah. Are we going to mess with cute penguins? We are absolutely going to mess with cute penguins. Look at this penguin. This penguin is too cute and too happy, and it's had it easy for too long. We are going to turn this penguin's life upside. We are going to punish this penguin for its cuteness by just giving it a lot of rules. Yeah. And as we talk about the rules, we're going to learn about a CSS concept that's really valuable. But I want to go really slowly here because this is a computer science concept and really a programming concept that's going to continue to be important. So is this the first time that you all have seen the idea of variables? Yeah, we're only going to mess with the penguin in loving ways. We're going to be gentle to this penguin. We're not going to hurt. The penguin is going to stay just as happy, I promise. We may like briefly delete its feet, but we'll bring them right back. So variables are the ability to it's the ability to make up a construct. So I'm going to make up a name for something. I'm going to assign things for this name, and then I'm going to use the name of this construct I've invented in order to sort of boss it around. And you say, Jess, variables are weird. And I'm like, yeah. Variables are just like inheritance, where they're going to make a little bit more sense the more we play with them. But right now, I really love this example. So naturally, I think Free Code Camp has done a good job because oh, Felis, look at you. A variable is when you make a box and you label it and you put things in that box. Then instead of dealing with all of the things separately, you can say, hey, I'm going to go get my box named this and do things with this box. That's, such a fantastic way. Everything's fine. And I really like the way that Free Code Camp is teaching us about variables because here we've got the format for our CSS variables. So we get this dash dash and I'll say, hey, set me a variable. And CSS is like, cool. I'm going to make you a box labeled penguin skin. And CSS isn't even going to judge you. CSS isn't like, well, that's gross. Why are you, what? That's gross. Why do you want penguin skin? CSS is like, sure, you weirdo. Have a variable called penguin skin. And I said, well, I want to create a variable called penguin skin, and I want to set it to black. And CSS, because CSS has no judgment, says, yeah, all right. I want to set a variable called penguin belly. And I want to put gray in that box called penguin belly. I want to create a box labeled penguin beak, and that box contains the value of yellow. Yeah. So each of these variables is a labeled box, and they contain the value of one color. And these boxes can hold multiple things at the same time, and it doesn't have to hold colors. Ooh, do you know what? It is absolutely possible to draw pictures like this with just CSS. And if you go to things like Code Sandbox or to CodePen, people build beautiful, beautiful pieces of art only with CSS. You all are infinitely more talented than I am. And if you really want, if you say, oh, I want to build beautiful things with CSS, you can absolutely do this. I can't do this because I'm lazy and frustrated, easily frustrated. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this penguin who's had it easy for too long. We're going to mess with him. Yeah. We're going to change his skin to gray. Oh, 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 he's bald now. We're going to set his belly to white. Oh no, he's so cute. I can't. And we're going to set his beak to orange. Ooh, look at that. The beak and the feet are set to the same thing. That's valuable to know. So here we see that we've got a bunch of different spaces. Look at this. That we've done a bunch. So we've set the width and height and border radius. This is really drawing the penguin, isn't it? This is drawing the penguin top. And here we come all the way down. Oh God, look at all of this CSS code. Look at it. Look at this deep chaos. And here we've got these divs and we say, hey, we're putting a penguin in here. Put the penguin bottom in here. Put the right hand in here. Put the left hand. So here, what really all we're doing, the CSS is just a little bit scary. Ideally, you should be able to read through it and get the general vibe of what's going on here. But you don't need to understand all of this right now. Yeah, everything's chill. I mean, everything's terrifying. Look at this. But it's terrifying in a chill kind of way. How about this? If you don't feel really confident, and I don't feel, being a hypocrite, was like, well, if you don't feel really confident with this, come back at the end of the course. But let's go ahead and come back at the end of the course and say, hey, we finished. We are finished with our certification. Let's come back and look at this code and see if it's a little bit less scary then. So we're going to run all our tests and we're going to mess with a penguin some more. We're going to create a custom variable. Last time it did it for us, and now we have to do it. And we say, oh no, oh, everything's strange. And said, well, I know you want a variable, and I don't know what it is yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and get weird. There we go. As soon as we, and why did it get weird? Why does that chill it out? So as soon as I had those two dashes, my penguin got weird. And as soon as I added the semicolon, it chilled out. And the issue really is not that I began a class, it's that I began a variable and I didn't have my semicolon yet. So I'd said, hey, something's going on. And CSS says, well, I don't really know what's going on. I said, cool, me neither. But I didn't have that semicolon before I had all of these other things. So it would have just been weird trying to read position relative because I didn't have a semicolon between it and the next semicolon. Really, when I said dash dash penguin skin, what it did was mess with the CSS code that comes before, oh heck, that comes before the next semicolon. So whenever your CSS looks super weird, check and see if you've left one out. We're going to set the penguin skin to gray. And I'm going to control enter because I think that's going to work okay. Yeah. We've set a variable and control enter again. So after we create our variable, we can assign the value to other CSS properties by referencing the name you gave it. That's a lot of computer science language right in a row, isn't it? After you create your variable, you can assign the value to other CSS properties by referencing the name you gave it. What this really means is, hey, you put gray in this box, and maybe you have a bunch of things in this box. But if you want to use all of those things, instead of listing them, you could just say, hey, use penguin skin. Use this box of stuff I put together. And Felis, thank you so much again for giving me a variable is a box that you put stuff in, a box with a label. Yeah, and I think the label is really important. So we're going to apply the penguin skin variable to the background property of penguin top, penguin bottom, right hand, and left hand classes. Whew. You say, Jess, what? And it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. We're going to take some of this scary code and we're going to say, well, you know what? Right now, the top of this penguin, the background is set to black, but I want to reset. Oh no, I told you we were going to mess with this penguin. I want to reset that to penguin skin. And that hasn't worked at all. Why hasn't that worked at all? I bet you know why that hasn't worked. Our variables in CSS start with 2 dashes. Well, that hasn't worked either. Oh, is it because I can't spell penguin skin? What have I done? Penguin skin. What are you doing, Jess? All right, y'all help. I need to tell it. It's the sand. It is the sand rebelling. Do I need to wait? Show me the example. Oh gosh. Oh, I am a deadly serious professional. I completely forgot that you need to tell. And you all are you're lovingly screaming at me to say, Jess, you need to tell CSS it's a variable. You can't just add the dashes. You're right. And because I'm wrong all the time, which I cannot tell you how freeing it is to get chill about being wrong. Like, right? And like, even on video, do you know what? I just had a thought that I'm not entirely comfortable with, which is, well, this video will last on the internet for a long time. Oh, this will be a long woof, potentially after I am. But I don't like to think. I don't like the same as I didn't like the idea. Oh, do you think of 0 as a number or conceptually a lack of the number? It's like, oh, that's going to mess with me. And the oh, hey, you forgetting to type var is going to live far, far longer than you will. I was like, oh, that's not comforting. But once you get really chill about being a goofus, a lot of stuff stops hurting. Yeah. Oh, we'll be digital. Hopefully, whoever comes after us will view our foibles with gentle affection. So what I'm doing here is I'm just copying and pasting. So I'm Control C, Control V for where it says background. I want var parentheses -- penguin skin. You say, well, Jess, why are you copying and pasting? I say, oh, it's because I'm very lazy. Yeah. Also, because and you see that every time I replace this, so I take the right hand and change the background to the variable penguin skin, it turned gray. So it set the value of the background to what's inside the box labeled penguin skin. I really like Free Code Camp because it's so good at abstracting stuff away. The people who make Free Code Camp, they say, you know what? We think this is a lot of CSS and we think this is really challenging. Have some comments. Yeah. We've gone ahead and we've made this precious penguin gray. I think we can run our tests. Everything continues to be. Oh no, my precious child. What about attaching a fallback value to our CSS variable? And we've learned about fallback values before. So we learned about them when we talked about importing a font and we said, hey, I want my font to be lobster. In case something goes wrong, just do monospace instead. Just if you don't have lobster, here's what I want. And here it says, Angel's asking, oh, is the penguin my victim or my precious child? I think both, really. This is why I live alone, where it's like, oh, my beloved precious infant, subject to my whims. So we love our penguin very much, and we're just experimenting on our beloved, which is not something you get to do with pets or children, but computers make us weird. Yeah. So we're going to set a fallback. And the fallback is to say, well, I want you to use this variable, but if something goes wrong, or if you can't find this variable, here's a backup, here's an understudy. And here's how we do it. Say, here's the example. The background equals variable penguin skin. Then we're going to add a comma and a space and say, well, if you can't get that variable, well, just make it black, please. This can be really useful for debugging. If you say, well, something's gone wrong, I'm going to go through and I'm going to change things to bright pink. And I say, well, whenever one of these fails, make it bright pink. You say, well, what? I don't want it to be pink, Jess. Why would I? Yeah, so it's just like the fallback with fonts. And the reason I might make my fallback bright pink is that so if something fails, it'll be really visible when it fails. So it looks like there's a problem with the variable supplied to penguin top and penguin bottom. So instead of fixing the typo, ooh, this is going to hurt me, we're going to add a fallback value of black to the background property of penguin top and penguin bottom. Yeah. So here we've got a comma. I'm going to say black. Give it in this little head tag. When I come to penguin bottom, and ooh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, and you think, oh, who makes typos in something as important as programming? And me, I do all the time. You think that when you're doing deadly serious computer science, that all of your problems are going to be, oh, I've mistakenly done the math wrong on this very. No, it's because you tried to write penguin and you wrote penguin, and you're going to spend 45 minutes looking deep into your soul to try and work out where you went wrong. And it's just two letters that live on the wrong side of each other. Everything's going to be terrible. Everything's going to be so frustrating, but it's going to be frustrating in a way that you can totally handle. Improve compatibility with browser fallbacks. So let's talk about browser compatibility for a minute. Actually, while we're doing this, can you all tell me what browser you're using? So what program are you using to watch this? Or what program are you using when you open up Free Code Camp? And you say, well, what do you mean what program? It's the internet. But do you use Chrome? Or, oh, look at these. We've got folks on Chrome. We've got folks on Chrome and Opera. What browser are you using? Yes. I tend to use a lot of Firefox just because I'm a privacy weirdo. Oh, we've got Sabina, who's also a privacy nerd, using Brave. Firefox. Oh, we learned about Firefox Developer last week. And we learned a little bit about uses IE. Do you know what? IE support is ending. If they can switch, they should switch. But not everybody has that kind of freedom. Like sometimes you use a school computer or a work computer. And I think saying, hey, I know somebody who still uses Internet Explorer is really important because that's an older browser. It's not really supported anymore, but there are still people out there using it, which is so important to look at. We've got folks using Vivaldi and Safari, so a whole bunch of different browsers out in the wild. But even though standards bodies exist and we mostly agree on the way we write HTML and the way we support them, sometimes have you ever tried to get a bunch of grown-ups to agree about where you're going to dinner or a party or how to paint a house? Getting a bunch of people to agree on anything is a mess, right? Getting a bunch of engineers to agree on something over the course of 20, 25, 30 years gets to be messy as well. Yeah, good luck with that. So even though there are standards bodies, and we're going to have somebody from the W3C come as a guest later on and talk to us about what that looks like, making those decisions, there can be some variations. So say, hey, I'm building a website. I need to think about accessibility. And yes, you do. I need to think about how big my website is and how quickly it loads. And yes, you do. But you also need to think about what browsers and what kinds of devices your users are going to be using. So the same way I said, this is an empty thread. I'm really not going to fight you. Remember when I was like, oh, you must use alt text, otherwise I will show up at your house and yell at you. I'm not going to. That's a lot of travel. You must test in different browsers before you launch your website, or else I will show up at your house and yell at you. So, when working with CSS, we'll likely run into browser compatibility issues. And that means, hey, this other browser that my user's using does a weird thing. It does a weird, unexpected thing. And sometimes you want to create a fallback. And that's like saying, well, I know I know that I'm using a developer version of Firefox. I'm using the developer version of Chrome. I'm using the newest, fanciest things. But maybe somebody using an older browser doesn't have access to these features yet. I'm going to go ahead and develop as though I'm in the future, but I'm going to create these fallbacks because not everybody else has joined us in the future yet. Yeah. We're going to create a browser fallback, and it's as easy as providing another, more widely supported value immediately before your declaration. That way, an older browser will be like, I know what you mean. Whereas a newer browser will see the old thing and go, all right, yeah. And then it'll see the next thing and go, oh no, but this is what you really mean. Remember when we talked about the order sometimes mattering? And this is a time when the order really matters, and it's really exciting. We're sort of tricking CSS, where CSS says, hey, if you give me two things that are equally powerful, I'll use the second one. But if you give me two things of equal power and my user can't use the second one, my user still has the old one, the first one to fall back on. Yeah, everything's chill. Well, I mean, it's saying we don't have to worry about Internet Explorer after June 2022. I mean, there's still going to be people on it. It's not going to be supported. It's not going to be well patched, but all of these users aren't going to just disappear. A lot of people are being told, oh, you don't have to support Internet Explorer anymore. But I'd be very surprised if everyone in the world said, oh, June, I've definitely got to switch my browser. There's always going to be holdouts. So the variable being used to set the background color of Redbox, we're going to improve our browser compatibility by adding another background declaration right before the existing declaration and set its value to red. And that sounds very fancy. That sounds like a lot of computer talk. But it's just saying, hey, I'm going to set the background to red here. And this way, if I'm using a browser that knows about CSS variables, it'll see this and say red, and then I'll say, oh, hey, you've just said red twice. That's chill. That doesn't really change my mind about everything. But if I'm coming in from an older browser that says, come in, red color equals red, set this variable, and then I say, I want the background to be red. And my old browser says, yeah. Oh, yeah, let's talk about root a little bit. We haven't seen this before. Let's go ahead and what would I search for? What would I search to get this? The two ways we do this are we search for it or we get weird. And we're a little slim on time. So instead of getting weird, let's search for it. Let me get this tab up. And we've got root. It is a pseudo class. Isn't that cool? It's a fake class. It's a pretend class. And it selects the root element of the document. In this case, HTML. You say, oh, Jess, what? And I say, no, be cool. Be cool. I got you. So this is going to be super weird because we haven't explicitly learned about these HTML top elements yet. We've previewed them. Like when we looked at the documentation for a website, it said, oh, we'll set these HTML elements, and those will be the top level, the most parent elements we can get. And when you say root, what it's doing is saying, hey, this is like a selector, but it's selecting HTML. This means everything that exists within my HTML file, give it this rule. Yeah, it's just a quasi class, a fake class, an imaginary class, a real imaginary class, which means all of my HTML. Isn't that weird? Isn't that exciting? We're going to come right back. Sorry, you get my head looking big and surprised. So we're going to come all the way back. I've got another really good question. So it's not root within main. Yeah. So when we look at the structure of our HTML, we've got our doc type, which declares what our document is at the top, and then we've got a HTML opening tag and an HTML closing tag. An HTML element encapsulates all of our HTML file, and then body and then main will come inside those. So it's the most zoomed out HTML element. So how many types of selectors have we learned today? So we've learned the very general ones. We've learned we've already learned back when we started CSS to select specific named elements. This pseudo one feels a little different. Yeah. Today we've talked about ID, class, element. Egg roll points out. Mad Star's like, type. Oh, and we reviewed inline, and we talked about important. Important seems more like yelling than a selector itself, doesn't it? Actually, we've got, how much time have we got left? Do we want to finish this whole thing? Or we've only got a couple minutes left. How about we do both things at the same time? Look at this. Oh, CSS Diner. Yes, that was CSS Dinner. That was one of the games I was thinking of. Thank you so much, Kazia. So, are there any questions about anything at all I can help answer for you? Yeah. Do you have questions about anything we've covered today? Anything we've covered today, or shall I go ahead and continue working the way through? So Sashin, is that a question about block versus inline? If you can give me a little bit more information about that, that would be really useful. Ooh, do you need a style wrapper in your CSS file? That's really useful. So let's go ahead and take a look at let's take a look at how CSS is structured. So we're going to go ahead, let me grab this file, and this is going to be the same kind of thing we looked at when we talked about, hang on, one thing at a time. So how CSS is structured is a perfect question. Let's go ahead and review this. And so let's talk about this. We've got a couple different of these left. So we're going to talk about CSS inheritance. And I'm going to ask you to do this on your own because I'm a very mean teacher. Let's look at what I'm going to ask you to do on your own. So please do these last three on your own. And then, because I'm a monster, because I'm terrible, see if you can get about halfway through these applied visual design. Implied visual design is really, really exciting because you're going to be doing HTML and CSS at the same time and really getting those to flow. Now, we're going to come to Monica's incredibly good question. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to stop looking at your homework. So go ahead and finish up CSS and try and see how much of the applied visual design you can get through. That's me with my very big head again. And we're going to come into this Chrome tab and look at how CSS is structured. And I really like MDN trying to help us. And it says, well, this is what you're going to know. It's an external style sheet. So, yeah, Sasha, I'm seeing a couple questions from you. I'm going to get to these in just 1 second. I absolutely promise. Oh, Sasha, one of your questions is, can you start building the free Code Camp projects? Yeah. Anybody who wants to, you don't have to go to the end and then start the projects. Your lives are going to be better and fuller if you try experimenting with those projects now and do them little by little as you learn new things. Yeah, I want to encourage you early and encourage you often to add, to start adding and start building out those projects. I see another question for you. I promise I'm going to come back to it. But here's what your HTML is going to look like. Doc type HTML. And you say, Jess, I didn't ask for HTML. And I said, give me a second. Give me a second. HTML. Here's that HTML element we talked about where it starts and ends, the one element to rule them all. And here in your head, you're linking link rel equals styles sheet. And then the ref, where it's pointed, is to styles.css. Yeah, and that's generally what you're going to name it. And here's what your CSS file sheet might look like. You don't have to have the styles. You just need to call it. The name of the file should be styles.css. And that'll go ahead and, if it's a .css file, it's going to know that you mean these are styling. Yeah, so you don't have to. It's fine. Sashin, I haven't booked the Wednesday guest lectures. I'm going to get those up today, I promise. It should be about the same time as last time, which isn't helpful. I'm still booking guests. I've had a very, very busy week. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to come all the way up, and Sashin's asking, hey, what's the difference between block versus inline? And really, so inline is when we put the CSS inside our HTML element. And then when we put it inside when we put the CSS rules in a separate file or put the style tags at the top, those are really the difference between writing CSS in a separate file or inline, or block in a style block at the top. So separate file is a separate file. Block is when it's you've got the style opening and closing tags and you write your CSS within them. And inline is when you write your CSS in the same line, so in the same HTML element as is being targeted. Yeah. So, curious question. Could you do other animals instead of a... Yes, you could do... You know what? If you ask too many good questions, I'm going to send you and make you do a walrus. Yep. If once you feel comfortable experimenting and getting weird with CSS, you can make effectively whatever you want. When I say I mean you can make whatever you want. You're going to be very talented and very skilled in CSS, and I'm joyously bad at it. It's a crime that I'm teaching you all, really. But people who are talented with CSS can build beautiful, baroque, sweeping pieces of art. Gigi's pointing out somebody made the Mona Lisa. Like, I'm not gonna make you do anything. Y'all are grown-ups. But yeah, you can make whatever your heart desires once you get these very boring basic foundation skills in. These are fantastic questions. I love can I build whatever I want? And I was like, yes. There are rules, but you can get as weird as you like on the internet. That's the whole original point of the World Wide Web, is to let people get weird and meet other people. So I'm going to be heading out in just a second. Please do make sure you finish the last 3 CSS points on your own, just to make sure you get the feel for them. And if you've got the time, go ahead and get started in the applied visual design. This is going to have us writing HTML and CSS together and having those interact with each other in a much more powerful way. Oh, so we've got, why do we use only hex codes? So we don't have to use only hex. Oh, heck. We don't only have to use hex codes. You can do RGB if you want, or you can use the color name, red, magenta, pink. I like RGB and hex because they give us a lot more power. Remco's asking, do browsers prioritize margin over padding? And I confess I don't know. I confess I would have to look that up. And since we're out of time, I'm going to lovingly encourage you to look it up. I'm so mean. I adore you. You are all absolutely brilliant, and it is a privilege to get to learn alongside you. But something about 2 hours of talking to the computer makes me nice and tired. I'm going to go have a cup of tea. You all are going to have, if you don't mind me being mean to you. Okay. Palak is asking, are we going to learn CSS animation on this course? And I don't think we're going to do any explicit CSS animation. Those tend to be a little bit more advanced. We're not going to need it for this certification. Um, it doesn't really require JavaScript, but it's not something we're going to cover this one. There are some fantastic tutorials on CSS animation out there. Sorry to be a bit boring. So I will go ahead and oh, fab. The whole point of having a beautiful assistant, isn't it? Is it so somebody smarter than me is like, here's what happens when margin and padding conflicts. So if anybody wants to applaud my very beautiful, very clever, and delight assistant sounds demeaning, my collaborative partner, my silent partner, Mervin, who's just so smart and so interesting, so sweet. We can all say, hey, Mervin, and thank you, Mervin. I will let all of you go. Please have the easiest possible early morning or afternoon or the middle of the night. I'm going to be back. Oh, one more. I love all these little sneaks. Competitive programming, I mean, it's just like a weird hobby some computer people do. Cause like, I know you're like, I'm not good at it. Being a good competitive programmer, I think doesn't make you a good programmer. Like I think those are two different skills, right? Like I don't think you need to be a good competitive. If you don't like it or if you're not good at it, don't worry. Yep, we finished all. So on the stream, we finished all but the last 3 CSS modules. Please finish them on your own. And please get started on the applied visual design because that's where we're going to be starting next week. Cool. Um, Goodbye, all of my very favorite online learners. I'll chat to you soon. Bye.